12-year-old boy is laughing. He is standing on the back of a 6-legged sky bison, arms outstretched, wind in his robes, and the sky around him is enormous and blue and utterly free of anything that could hurt him. Below, the clouds part to reveal green mountains. The music is bright, the colours are warm, and if you have never seen this show before, you might believe for just a moment that this is what the whole thing is going to be like. A boy, a bison, an adventure. It is not. Avatar: The Last Airbender premiered on Nickelodeon on February 21st, 2005, created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. And over the course of 3 seasons and 61 episodes, it told a story that began with a child's laughter and ended with a 14-year-old girl chained to a grate, sobbing and breathing fire, her mind shattered beyond repair. Between those two images lies one of the most carefully constructed descents into darkness that serialized fiction has ever attempted. Not because the show wanted to shock you, not because it wanted to prove that a cartoon could be mature, but because every piece of light it gave you was designed to make the shadows behind it sharper, and it trusted you enough to notice. That is what this video is about. Not a recap, not a ranking, a guided descent. We are going to start where the show starts, with colour and wonder and the promise of something beautiful, and we are going to follow it down, layer by layer, into the things it was actually saying underneath. And by the time we reach the bottom, you will understand why this show, more than almost any other piece of fiction made for young audiences, earns the darkness it depicts. This is Ember. Settle in. This one is going to take a while. Not a recap narrator. Every moment discussed earns its place by revealing something about the show's deeper patterns. And the pattern we are tracing tonight is the one that matters most: the slow, inexorable descent from surface to depth, from colour to shadow, from a boy laughing on a sky bison to a girl sobbing in chains. The show earned both of those images. Understanding how it got from one to the other is the work of this video. What the show does best, and what we are going to trace from beginning to end, is build darkness the way a composer builds a symphony. It does not begin in the minor key, it begins in the major. The first notes are bright, the melody is inviting, the rhythm is steady and warm, and then so gradually that you barely notice the shift, a dissonant note enters, and then another, and the melody is still there, still recognizable, still yours, but the harmony underneath it has changed, and by the time you realize how far you have traveled from the opening phrase, you are already deep inside something you did not expect. The show does not drag you into the darkness, it walks you there, and by the time you arrive, you understand that you came willingly, because every step of the way, the show gave you a reason to keep walking. Consider for a moment how the show introduces its world. The opening narration spoken by Katara is a summary that functions as a lullaby. Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the 4 nations lived together in harmony. The cadence is fairy tale. The structure is myth. Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. There it is, 6 words that split the sentence in half and change its genre from bedtime story to war chronicle. The show tells you what it is in its opening breath. It just does it so gracefully that most people hear the melody and miss the lyric. The surface of Avatar: The Last Airbender is by any reasonable measure gorgeous. The world is built on a premise so elegant it could fit on the back of a napkin. 4 nations, each aligned with one of the classical elements: water, earth, fire, air. Within each nation, certain people can manipulate their corresponding element through physical movement, a practice the show calls bending. The movements are drawn from real Chinese martial arts. Water bending is modelled on Tai Chi. Earth bending draws from Hung Gar Kung Fu. Fire bending takes its forms from northern Shaolin. Air bending is rooted in Baguazhang. The result is a magic system that does not feel like magic at all. It feels like a physical discipline. It feels earned. And when you watch Katara pull a ribbon of water from a river, or Toph crack the earth beneath her bare feet, or Aang ride a sphere of air across a courtyard, it does not look like a special effect. It looks like something these characters trained for, struggled for, and deserve. The world is divided into 4 nations, and the nations are not interchangeable. The water tribes live at the poles, their architecture carved from ice and snow, their culture shaped by tides and moons. The Earth Kingdom is vast and varied, from the desert of Sai Wong to the impenetrable walls of Ba Sing Se. The Fire Nation is volcanic and industrial, its military machinery fueled by a philosophy of expansion. The air nomads lived in temples perched on mountaintops, their society organized around monastic principles of freedom, detachment, and spiritual harmony. Lived, past tense. And the fact that you can hear the shift in tense, the way it tilts the sentence from description into eulogy, is the first sign that the surface is not the whole story. At the center of this world is the Avatar, a single being reincarnated across the 4 nations in an endless cycle, capable of bending all 4 elements, tasked with maintaining balance between the nations and serving as the bridge between the physical world and the spirit world. When the show begins, the current current avatar is Aang, a 12-year-old air nomad boy who ran away from home, got caught in a storm, encased himself and his sky bison Appa in a sphere of ice through an involuntary activation of the avatar state, and remained frozen for 100 years. He is found by Katara and Sokka, two teenagers from the Southern Water Tribe, and together they set out on a journey to help Aang master all four elements, so he can defeat the Fire Nation and restore balance to a world ravaged by 100 years of war. That is the premise. And the premise is a quest narrative, a chosen one, a band of young heroes, a villain to defeat. On the surface, the architecture of the show is as familiar as a fairy tale, but the show does not live on the surface, and the deeper you go, the more you realise that every bright colour was chosen to make what is underneath it harder to look away from. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The first crack in the surface comes in the third episode of Book 1, The Southern Air Temple. It aired on February 25th, 2005, just 4 days after the series premiere. Aang is excited. He is going home. He has been frozen for 100 years without knowing it, and the last thing he remembers is the Southern Air Temple, alive with monks and sky bison and the sound of wind through the courtyards. Katara and Sokka already know what he does not. Katara has pieced it together. The Fire Nation attacked the air nomads. There are no airbenders left. Aang is the last one, but nobody has told him. Nobody can figure out how. The show takes its time with this. It lets Aang run ahead through the temple, pointing at things, narrating memories. Here is where the monks used to play airball. Here is where Gyatso, his mentor, taught him to make air pies. The camera follows him, and the silence of the place fills the spaces between his words. Nothing answers him. No one is there, and then he finds the skeleton. Monk Gyatso, his mentor, the man who taught him to laugh, surrounded by the remains of Fire Nation soldiers, suggesting that Gyatso fought back, that he took a number of them with him before the end. Aang does not process this the way an adult would. He does not grieve quietly. He does not rationalize. He enters the avatar state, his eyes and tattoos glowing white, the wind around him becoming a cyclone of fury and grief. Katara talks him down. She tells him that she and Sokka are his family now. Think about that scene for a moment. A 12-year-old boy discovers that everyone he has ever known is dead. His teacher, his friends, his entire civilization gone, reduced to bones in an empty temple. And he discovers it not because someone sits him down and explains it gently, but because he walks into a room and sees the skeleton of the man who raised him. The show does not cut away. It does not soften the image. It holds on Aang's face as the realization arrives. And the realization is not a single moment. It is a wave. First confusion, then understanding, then rage so pure it bypasses every defense a child has and goes straight to the deepest, most uncontrollable power inside him. This is the third episode. This is still the beginning. And the show has already told you, if you were paying attention, that the adventure is a shell around a grief story. And the grief is not going to be neatly resolved. Aang will carry the knowledge that his entire people were slaughtered for the rest of the series. He will visit the other air temples and find them empty too. He will meet no other airbenders. He will never hear another human being use the word home and mean what he means by it. The boy on the back of the sky bison, arms outstretched, laughing, is the last survivor of a genocide. And the show told you that in episode 3, but it does not dwell. That is the structural trick. The show delivers the darkest revelation of its entire mythology, and then it moves on. The next episode is The Warriors of Kyoshi, which is lighter, funnier, more action-oriented. Aang shows off for a group of fans. Sokka gets humbled by a girl. There is a giant fish. The tonal whiplash is not accidental, it is architecture. The show gives you space to breathe after the devastation, and that breathing room makes the next descent, when it comes, feel even steeper. Because the question the show has planted in your mind, the question it will not let you forget, is this. If they told you about a genocide in episode 3, what are they holding back for later? The answer, as it turns out, is everything. 7 episodes after the Southern Air Temple, there is an episode called The Storm. It is the 12th episode of Book 1. It aired on June 3rd, 2005. Written by Aaron Ehasz, the series head writer, and it is the episode that changes what the show is about. The Storm does something structurally audacious. It runs 2 parallel flashback narratives. In one, Aang tells Katara why he ran away from the Air Temple. In the other, Iroh tells the crew of Zuko's ship why Zuko was banished and scarred. The two stories are intercut, and as the episode progresses, the parallels between them become impossible to ignore. Both are stories about children who were given responsibilities they were not ready for. Both are stories about the adults who failed them, and both end with the same image: a child, alone, facing a storm that is much bigger than they are. Aang's story is about the weight of being chosen. The monks of the Southern Air Temple identified him as the Avatar at the age of 12, 4 years earlier than the traditional age of 16, because they sensed that war was coming and believed they were running out of time. The moment the other children learned he was the Avatar, they stopped playing with him. His friends excluded him from games because they said it was not fair. The adults began treating him as a responsibility rather than a person. Only monk Gyatso continued to treat him like a child, and the elders decided to separate them, planning to send Aang to the Eastern Air Temple to complete his training away from Gyatso's influence. The night he learned he was going to be sent away, Aang ran. He packed nothing. He told no one. He climbed onto Appa and flew into a storm, and the storm brought him down, and the Avatar state froze him in ice, and 100 years passed while his people died and the world burned. The fisherman in the episode is right. Aang turned his back on the world. The fact that he was 12 years old, that he was frightened, that the adults around him were dismantling the only life he knew, does not change the outcome. It only makes it more painful, because Aang knows the fisherman is right. He carries it. Zuko's story is about the cost of being good. Prince Zuko, at the age of 13, was allowed by his uncle Iroh to sit in on a war council. Iroh warned him to be silent. Zuko could not be silent. A general proposed a plan to sacrifice an entire division of novice Fire Nation soldiers as bait to lure Earth Kingdom forces into a trap. These were young soldiers, newly recruited, expendable in the eyes of the generals. Zuko stood up and said it was wrong. For speaking out against the general's plan, Zuko's father, Fire Lord Ozai, demanded that Zuko participate in an Agni Kai, a formal fire-bending duel. Zuko agreed, believing he would face the general he had insulted. When the duel began, he turned to face his opponents and found his father standing across from him. Ozai was the one he had dishonored, because the war meeting was the Fire Lord's chamber, and to speak out in it was to challenge the Fire Lord's authority. Zuko dropped to his knees. He begged for mercy. He refused to fight. A 13-year-old boy on his knees in front of his father, weeping, pleading. And Ozai burned him. He held fire to his son's face and left a scar that would never heal. A scar that covers the entire left side of Zuko's face, disfiguring his eye, marking him for the rest of his life. Then he banished him, told him he could return only when he had captured the Avatar, a being no one had seen in 100 years, sent him out into the world on a rusted ship with a skeleton crew, chasing a ghost, carrying a wound that says to everyone who sees it, "My father did this to me." The show frames this scene with extraordinary restraint. It does not show the moment of burning directly. It cuts to the reactions of the audience. You see Iroh cover his eyes, unable to watch. You see Zhao, the rival admiral, looking on with satisfaction. You see the crowd, silent, and then you hear the scream, a child's scream, and the camera holds on Iroh's face as the sound fills the room. There is something the show does here that most analyses of this episode miss. When Iroh tells this story to Zuko's crew, it is not because the crew asked. It is because the crew has been complaining. They have been saying that Zuko is harsh, ungrateful, obsessive, difficult, and Iroh tells them this story so they will understand. The scar is not a character trait. It is evidence. The obsession is not a personality flaw. It is a survival mechanism. The boy who screamed on the floor of the Agni Kai arena is still screaming. He is just doing it quietly now, in the form of a relentless, years-long hunt for a target that will restore what his father took from him. Now place these two stories side by side, the way the episode does. Aang ran from responsibility and his people died. Zuko stood up for what was right and his father maimed him. The boy who fled and the boy who stayed, the boy who avoided the hard thing and the boy who did the hard thing, and neither of them escaped. That is the thesis of The Storm, and it is the thesis that the rest of the show will spend 2 more seasons deepening. In the world of Avatar, The Last Airbender, there is no version of childhood that the war does not touch. There is no choice a child can make that protects them from the consequences of the adult's failures. The show deepens this thesis in Book 2 with an episode that stands as one of the finest half hours of television the series ever produced. Zuko Alone, the 7th episode of Book 2. It aired on May the 12th, 2006, written by Elizabeth Welch E. Haas. The title is a description and a diagnosis. Zuko has separated from Iroh. He is travelling through the Earth Kingdom on his own, disguised as a commoner, his ponytail cut, his armor gone. He is nobody. And the episode asks what remains of a person when every external marker of identity has been stripped away. Zuko rides into a small Earth Kingdom village. He meets a boy named Lee, a farm child whose older brother has been conscripted into the Earth Kingdom army. Lee is drawn to Zuko the way children are drawn to anyone who seems dangerous and competent. He gives Zuko food. He shows him around. He treats Zuko like an older brother because his actual older brother is gone, swallowed by the war. Intercut with the present-day story are flashbacks to Zuko's childhood in the Fire Nation Palace. These flashbacks reveal the family dynamics that produced both Zuko and Azula. Zuko's mother, Ursa, loved Zuko openly, visibly, protectively. She read to him. She watched him practice. She was present. Azula, even as a young child, was different. She delighted in cruelty. She taunted Zuko. She manipulated Ty Lee and Mai, her childhood friends, with a casual viciousness that the other children did not know how to resist. And Ursa watched Azula with an expression that was not hatred, but was not warmth either. It was something closer to fear. There is a flashback in this episode where young Azula tells Zuko that their father, Ozai, has been ordered by Fire Lord Azulon to kill Zuko. Azula delivers this information with a smile. She treats her brother's potential murder as entertainment, and when Zuko does not believe her, she taunts him. Later, their mother comes to Zuko's room in the middle of the night, wakes him, tells him that everything she has done has been to protect him, and then disappears. She is never seen again in the series. The implication, confirmed later in the comics, is that Ursa made a deal with Ozai. She provided him with a poison to kill Azulon in exchange for Zuko's life, and then she was banished from the Fire Nation forever. The show gives you this backstory in fragments, each one carefully placed to maximum effect. In Zuko alone, the fragments serve a specific structural purpose. They show you who Zuko was before the scar, before the exile, before the anger. He was a boy who wanted his mother's love and his father's approval, and he got the first and never got the second, and his mother vanished before he was old enough to understand why. Back in the Earth Kingdom village, Zuko intervenes when soldiers harass Lee's family. He fights them. He defeats them with firebending, which reveals his true identity. He is Fire Nation. The people he just saved look at him with disgust. Lee, the boy who befriended him, the boy who saw him as a brother, backs away. The village rejects him. Zuko saved them, and they despise him for who he is. The final image of the episode is Zuko walking away from the village alone. The camera pulls back. The road stretches ahead of him, empty. He saved people who will never thank him. He was kind to a child who now fears him. He is marked, literally and figuratively, by a nation whose crimes he did not commit, and whose values he is beginning to reject but cannot escape. The episode does not resolve this. It leaves Zuko in the road, walking, carrying everything. What makes Zuko alone essential to understanding the show's relationship with darkness is that it takes the most sympathetic version of Zuko the show has yet presented, the version that feeds a hungry kid and defends a family from bullies, and it punishes him for it. Not because he did something wrong, because the world has decided that who he is matters more than what he does. The scar on his face is a brand. The nation he was born into is a verdict. And no amount of individual goodness can overcome the collective judgment. This is not a lesson the show learned from other children's shows. This is a lesson from history. The child of the perpetrator class, carrying visible evidence of the perpetrator's crimes, trying to do right in a land that has every reason to hate them. The show does not pretend this is simple. It does not resolve it with a handshake or an apology. It lets it stand as what it is, a wound that no single act of kindness can heal, because the wound is not personal. It is structural. It is the shape of the world. The Siege of the North, the two-part finale of Book 1, episodes 19 and 20, which aired on December 2nd, 2005, introduces another layer of darkness that the show handles with extraordinary care. The Northern Water Tribe is under attack. Admiral Zhao, who has spent the season scheming and posturing, has assembled a massive fleet and is assaulting the Northern Water Tribe with the full force of the Fire Nation Navy. During the siege, Zhao does something that goes beyond military strategy. He kills the Moon Spirit. The Moon, in the Avatar world, is not just a celestial body. It is the source source of waterbending. The first waterbenders learned their art from the moon, the way the first earthbenders learned from badger moles, and the first firebenders learned from dragons. The moon is sacred. It is the spiritual foundation of an entire bending discipline, and Zhao reaches into the spirit oasis, a sacred pool in the heart of the Northern Water Tribe, pulls out the physical form of the moon spirit, a koi fish that has been swimming in the pool for millennia, and kills it. The sky goes red, waterbending ceases to function. The Northern Water Tribe, mid-battle, loses the source of its power. The show presents this as a violation so profound that even Iroh, a Fire Nation general, turns against Zhao to stop it. Iroh threatens Zhao with destruction if he kills the spirit. Zhao kills it anyway. The moon dies, the world goes dark, and then a girl named Yue, the princess of the Northern Water Tribe, steps forward. Yue was born sick, nearly dead at birth, and her parents prayed to the moon spirit, which gave a portion of its life force to save the infant. Yue has carried the moon spirit's essence inside her since infancy, and now with the moon dead, she gives it back. She touches the dead koi fish, and the life force leaves her body and enters the spirit, and the moon returns to the sky, and Yue disappears. She does not die in the conventional sense. She becomes the moon spirit. She ascends. She is, in the language of the show, transformed. But transformation is a polite word for what actually happens, which is that a 16-year-old girl gives up her physical existence, her future, her identity, her relationship with Sokka, who loves her, everything, to restore something that was destroyed by a man's ambition. She sacrifices herself, and the show asks you to understand this as both beautiful and terrible. Beautiful because the moon returns and the waterbenders are saved. Terrible because a child paid the price. Sokka carries this loss for the rest of the series. When Suki teases him about a previous girlfriend during the Serpent's Pass in Book 2, Sokka goes quiet and says that his first girlfriend turned into the moon. It is played as an awkward moment. It is also a 16-year-old boy summarizing the worst thing that has ever happened to him in a single sentence, because he does not have the words for more. And even if he did, the people around him would not know what to do with them. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show spends much of its first season building the geography of its world and the dynamics of its cast, and within that process it embeds something that does not announce itself as darkness at all. It presents itself as context, background, world building, the sort of information that fills in the edges of a fantasy world and makes it feel lived in. But when you pull back and look at what the show is actually telling you about the Southern Water Tribe, the picture is not world building at all. It is a case study in cultural annihilation conducted so methodically over such a long period of time that by the time you recognize what happened, the damage is already complete. Katara is the last waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe. That fact is established in the first episode and repeated throughout the series. But the show does not treat it as a fixed piece of backstory. It unfolds it slowly across multiple seasons, each new piece of information making the previous ones worse. In Book 1, we learn that the Fire Nation conducted raids on the Southern Water Tribe, systematically identifying and capturing every waterbender they could find. This is presented matter-of-factly as Katara explains why she is the only bender left. It sounds bad. It is worse than it sounds, because the show eventually reveals, in the Book 3 episode The Puppet Master, which aired on November 9th, 2007, exactly what happened to those captured waterbenders. They were imprisoned, not in ordinary cells, in specially designed facilities where the air was pumped dry to prevent them from accessing any moisture. They were suspended off the ground so they could not reach water through the earth. Before being given water to drink, their hands and feet were bound. Any sign of resistance was met with punishment. The show describes a prison engineered to neutralize the fundamental identity of its inmates. These were not prisoners of war in any conventional sense. Raiders. They were people defined by their relationship to an element, and their captors built a world around them in which that element did not exist. The Fire Nation did not just capture the Southern Waterbenders, it erased them. It built architecture specifically designed to make them something other than what they were. One woman survived. Her name is Hama. She is old when Team Avatar meets her, running an inn in a Fire Nation village, and she seems kind. She seems familiar. She reminds Katara of her grandmother. She is a Southern Water Tribe waterbender who was among those captured in the raids, and she tells Katara her story, and her story is a horror film compressed into a monologue. Hama discovered that she could feel the full moon's energy even inside her cell. She realized that water exists inside all living things, and over the course of years, she practiced manipulating the water inside the bodies of rats that crawled across her cell floor. When she was ready, she turned the technique on her guards. She forced one of them to unlock her cage, his body moving against his will, his muscles obeying her instead of him. She walked free, and then she settled in a Fire Nation town and began abducting innocent civilians during the full moon, imprisoning them in a cave beneath a mountain, using the same technique on people who had nothing to do with her imprisonment. The technique is called bloodbending. It is exactly what it sounds like. The waterbender takes control of the water inside another person's body and forces them to move, or stop moving, or bend, or break against their will. It is the darkest application of waterbending the show depicts, and the show presents it not as a villain's power, but as a survivor's adaptation. Hama did not invent bloodbending because she was evil. She invented it because she was locked in a box for decades by people who tried to erase everything she was, and she found the one thing they could not take from her, and she turned it into a weapon. And then the episode does something that elevates it from a horror story into a tragedy. Hama forces Katara to learn bloodbending, not through persuasion, through violence. She uses it on Sokka and Aang, forcing them to attack each other, and the only way for Katara to stop it is to use bloodbending on Hama herself. Katara, the idealistic, compassionate heart of Team Avatar, is forced to reach inside another human being's body and seize control of it. And when it is over, when Hama is being led away in chains, Hama smiles. She looks at Katara and says, essentially, that her work is done, that Katara is now a bloodbender. Katara is crying. Her friends are trying to comfort her, and the camera holds on her face, and what you see there is not just horror, it is contamination. The war has reached inside her and changed something. The technique she used to save her friends is the same technique that was born in a prison cell designed to destroy her people. She did not choose it, she was forced into it, and now it is part of her. The show will return to this moment. In Book 3, Episode 16, The Southern Raiders, which aired on July 17th, 2008, Katara uses bloodbending again. She uses it on a man she believes killed her mother. She stops him in his tracks, forces him to his knees, bends the water in his body until he cannot move. And then she looks at his face and realizes he is not the right man, the wrong target. The technique born of desperation and trauma, deployed in an act of vengeance, and it did not even find the right person. The moment forces Katara to confront what she is becoming, and the show does not resolve that confrontation neatly. She does not use bloodbending again after that, but the show never suggests she has forgotten how. That is the trajectory the show builds for the Southern Water Tribe. The raids that seemed like background become an active narrative force. The loss that seemed historical becomes personal, and the survival strategy that emerged from the worst of that history becomes a curse passed from one generation of waterbenders to the next, from Hama to Katara, from the woman who was broken by the war to the girl who is trying to end it. The inheritance is not hope. It is the capacity for a very specific kind of violence. The Southern Water Tribe raids also eventually reveal the story of Katara's mother, Kaya. This is another piece of information the show parcels out across its entire run. In Book 1, we learn that Katara's mother is dead, killed during a Fire Nation raid when Katara was 8 years old. In Book 3, in the Southern Raiders, we learn the full story. The Fire Nation sent a unit called the Southern Raiders, led by a man named Yon-Ra, to find and eliminate the last remaining waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe. A young Katara walked walked in on Yon-Ra, interrogating her mother. Kaya told Katara to leave, to find her father. When Katara was gone, Kaya told Yon-Ra that she was the waterbender. She was not. Her daughter was. Kaya lied to protect Katara, and Yon-Ra killed her for it. The weight of that revelation, when it arrives in full, is enormous. Katara has spent her entire childhood knowing her mother was killed by the Fire Nation. She has carried that grief as the foundation of her identity, the reason she fights, the reason she left home, the reason she learned to bend. But the full truth is worse than the grief. Her mother did not just die in a raid. Her mother died in her place. Kaya gave her life so that Katara, the real waterbender, could survive. And 8-year-old Katara walked out of that tent and found her father and came back, and her mother was dead. She has lived with the knowledge that she is alive because her mother chose to die for her. And then Sokka, her brother, admits something in an earlier episode that makes it even worse. In The Runaway, the 7th episode of Book 3, which aired on November 2nd, 2007, Sokka confesses to Toph that he cannot remember what his mother looked like. When he tries to picture her face, all he sees is Katara's. His sister replaced his mother in his memory because after Kaya died, Katara stepped into the role. She became the caretaker. She did the cooking, the cleaning, the worrying, the holding together. She was 8 years old when this happened. She gave up her own childhood to fill the space her mother's death created. The show does not frame this as heroic. It does not celebrate Katara's sacrifice. It presents it as a wound, one that shapes everything she does, one that makes her fierce and compassionate and angry in equal measure, and one that nobody, including Katara herself, fully sees for what it is until the very end. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a character in Avatar, the last airbender, who exists in the show for a total of 3 episodes before disappearing, and his trajectory is one of the darkest things the series ever depicted. His name is Jet. He first appears in Book 1, Episode 10, an episode named after him, which aired on May the 6th, 2005. He is charismatic, handsome, confident, and instantly compelling. He leads a group of orphaned children called the Freedom Fighters who live in the trees above a Fire Nation-occupied forest and wage a guerrilla war against the soldiers below. The show lets you like Jet. It lets Katara fall for him. It gives him a backstory that earns your sympathy. The Fire Nation's rough rhinos destroyed his village and killed his parents when he was young. He has every reason to hate the Fire Nation, and his hatred has made him a leader. Children follow him. He protects them. He gives them purpose. And then the show reveals what Jet is actually planning. He has discovered a dam above a village that is occupied by Fire Nation soldiers, but also home to Earth Kingdom civilians, including elderly people and families. Jet's plan is to destroy the dam and flood the entire valley. Kill everyone, soldiers and civilians alike. The Fire Nation presence is the justification, but the collateral damage is the point. Jet has decided that any village occupied by the enemy is an enemy village, and everyone in it is acceptable to sacrifice. Sokka stops him. The village is evacuated in time. The flood hits an empty settlement, but the show does not treat this as a victory. It treats it as a warning. Jet is what happens when a child raised by war learns to see the world the way war sees it. People become targets. Collateral damage becomes strategy. The hatred that began as justified becomes totalizing, and the line between resistance fighter and terrorist vanishes. Jet disappears from the show after this episode and reappears in Book 2 in Ba Sing Se, where he has come with Smellerbee and Longshot to start a new life. He seems different. He seems like he is trying. And then he meets Zuko and Iroh, recognizes them as Fire Nation, and his old hatred returns instantly. He confronts them publicly, tries to provoke Zuko into firebending, and the Dai Li, Ba Sing Se's secret police, arrest him. What happens next is depicted in Lake Laogai, the 17th episode of Book 2, which aired on November 3rd, 2006. The Dai Li take Jet to their underground facility beneath Lake Laogai and subject him to brainwashing. The technique involves a rotating lamp and the repetition of phrases designed to overwrite his memories. The phrase they use is one that functions as a trigger for all their subjects, a reference to the Earth King inviting someone to Lake Laogai. The brainwashing strips Jet of his recent memories and replaces them with a fabricated history in which he has been living peacefully in the city. When Team Avatar encounters him again, Toph's ability to detect lies through vibrations in the earth reveals something disturbing. Jet believes he is telling the truth when he says he has been living peacefully. Smellerbee and Longshot, who saw the Dai Li take him, are also telling the truth. Both sides are sincere. Both sides contradict each other. The resolution is that Jet has been brainwashed so completely that his memories have been rewritten. With Katara's healing, Jet's real memories return, and he leads Team Avatar to Lake Laogai. In the underground facility, Long Feng, the Dai Li's leader, activates Jet's brainwashing trigger, forcing him to attack Aang. Aang breaks through to him by reminding him of who he is, and Jet turns on Long Feng. Long Feng strikes him down with an earthbending attack that the show strongly implies is fatal. Jet lies on the ground. His friends Smellaby and Longshot stay with him. Katara tries to heal him with her waterbending, and the look on her face says that she cannot. The show does not explicitly confirm that Jet dies. It leaves the moment ambiguous, a deliberate choice that it later acknowledges and even parodies in the Ember Island Players, where the in-universe play version of Jet is crushed by a rock, and a character says his death was really unclear. The creators of the show later confirmed in interviews that Jet does die in this scene. Think about the full arc. A boy whose parents were killed by the Fire Nation, a boy who turned his grief into violence, was stopped, tried to start over, was captured by his own government, had his mind rewritten, was used as a weapon against the people trying to help him, broke free of the programming, and died fighting the man who did it to him. The show gave this arc to a secondary character. It spent 3 episodes on it, and within those 3 episodes, it told a story about the way war eats its own children, chews them up, spits them out as instruments of the very systems they try to resist. Jet is not the only child soldier in Avatar. He is not even the most prominent, but his story is the one that makes the show's position on the subject clearest. The war does not care which side you are on. It will use you, break you, remake you and discard you, and the fact that your anger was justified does not protect you from what that anger becomes. The Dai Li themselves deserve a closer look, because what the show builds around Lake Laogai is not just a villain's lair. It is a commentary on institutional power so blunt it borders on allegory. The name itself is significant. Laogai is a real term. It refers to the system of labour camps used in the People's Republic of China for political re-education. The show named its underground brainwashing facility after a real system of ideological control and state-sponsored erasure of dissent. That is not subtext, that is text. Ba Sing Se, the great walled city of the Earth Kingdom, is presented in Book 2 as a place of safety. The walls are impregnable. The war has not reached here. Refugees flood in from the countryside, seeking shelter. But within the walls, the Dai Li, a secret police force nominally serving the Earth King, have constructed an elaborate system of information control. Citizens are not allowed to discuss the war. Anyone who brings it up is reported to the Dai Li. Dissidents, refugees who talk too openly about what they have seen, anyone who threatens the carefully maintained illusion of peace, is taken to Lake Laogai and brainwashed. The brainwashing is not just used on potential threats. It is used on the city's cultural ambassadors, women who are given the name Ju Di and serve as guides for important visitors. These women have been conditioned to the point where their original identities are suppressed beneath a compliant, smiling persona. When one Ju Di begins to crack under the pressure of managing Team Avatar, Long Feng replaces her with another. The women are interchangeable because the brainwashing has made them interchangeable. They are not people, they are functions. The show depicts all of this in a series rated TVY7. It depicts a totalitarian state operating within the borders of the nation that is supposed to be the good side. It shows government-sponsored brainwashing, political imprisonment, enforced amnesia, the suppression of free speech, and the reduction of human beings to tools of the state. And it does it without a single moment of graphic violence. The horror is structural, the horror is the system, and the show connects it to something even more unsettling. The Earth King does not know. The ruler of Ba Sing Se, the most powerful city in the world, has no idea what is happening in his his own government. Long Feng has been running the Dai Li independently, using the king's authority as a cover while keeping the king ignorant and compliant. The monarch is a puppet. The power is in the hands of the bureaucrats. The city that presents itself as humanity's last bastion against the Fire Nation is, in its own way, doing the same thing the Fire Nation does. It is controlling its people through fear and erasure. It is just doing it more quietly. Consider the 100-year war from the perspective of an Earth Kingdom refugee. You flee your home because the Fire Nation burned it. You travel hundreds of miles to the only safe city left. You arrive, exhausted and traumatized, and you are told there is no war within these walls. Your trauma is denied. Your experience is overwritten. If you persist in talking about the thing that destroyed your life, you are taken to a facility and your memories are altered until you agree that it never happened. The Fire Nation destroyed your world with fire. The Earth Kingdom destroys it with silence. That is what the show is doing. It is refusing to let you divide the world into simple moral categories. The Fire Nation is the aggressor. Yes. The Earth Kingdom is the victim. Yes. But the victim has built its own machinery of oppression, and that machinery runs on the same fuel. The belief that controlling people is more important than respecting them. The enemy is not one nation. The enemy is the thing inside nations that makes them treat their own citizens as problems to be managed rather than people to be heard. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Somewhere in the middle of Book 2, there is an episode that looks, at first, like a breather. The Tales of Ba Sing Se. It is the 15th episode of the season, the 35th overall. It aired on September 29th, 2006. The format is unusual. Instead of a single narrative, the episode tells 6 short vignettes, one for each of the main characters. Katara and Toph go to a spa, Sokka accidentally enters a poetry slam, Aang builds a zoo, Zuko goes on a date, Momo searches for Appa, and Iroh spends a day walking through the city, helping people. The first 5 vignettes are charming. Some are funny, some are sweet. They provide a window into who these characters are when they are not fighting, and they are valuable for that. But the 6th, Iroh's tale, is the one that stays. Iroh walks through the city. He buys a basket at a market. He helps a moonflower bloom by moving it into the shade. He encounters a crying boy on the street and borrows a musical instrument from a nearby shop and sings a song to calm him. The song is about a soldier boy coming home. He finds a group of children who have broken a window and gently encourages them to confess. He is mugged in an alley and, instead of fighting, teaches the mugger how to ambush people properly, then talks him out of being a criminal over tea. Each encounter is warm. Each one shows a different facet of Iroh's character. His patience, his wisdom, his humour, his ability to see people as they are and meet them where they stand. He is, in this episode, exactly the kind of person you want to spend time with. And then the vignette reaches its final scene. Iroh climbs a hill. Under a large tree, he lays out a cloth. He places a framed picture on it. He lights 2 incense sticks with a small burst of fire bending. He sits down and he looks at the picture, and his face, which has been smiling all day, begins to break. The picture is of his son, Lu Ten, dead. Lu Ten died during the siege of Ba Sing Se, the very city Iroh has been walking through all day. Iroh led that siege. He was the Dragon of the West, one of the most feared generals in Fire Nation history, and he brought his army to the walls of Ba Sing Se and laid siege for 600 days. And during that siege, his son was killed. The details of how Lu Ten died are never fully revealed. The show keeps that gap deliberately. What it gives you instead is the aftermath. Iroh abandoned the siege. He returned home. His father, Fire Lord Azulon, died under circumstances the show later reveals were murder. His brother Ozai took the throne, and Iroh, the man who could have challenged Ozai, who had the legitimate claim, who had the military reputation, did nothing. He let his brother have it because his son was dead and nothing else mattered. The show has been telling you this story in pieces for over a season by the time this episode airs. You know Iroh was a general, you know he lost his son, you know he treats Zuko like a surrogate child. But this is the first time the show lets you see the grief up close, and what it shows you is a man who has spent an entire day being kind to strangers, helping children, nurturing life, and then climbs a hill alone and weeps over a picture of the child he could not save. Iroh begins to sing. It is the same song he sang earlier to the crying boy on the street, but this time his voice breaks. The words are about a soldier boy marching home, and the soldier boy is not coming home. The soldier boy is dead. The man singing the song sent the soldier boy to war, and the soldier boy did not come back. The episode ends with a title card. In honor of Mako, Iroh's original voice actor, Mako Iwamatsu, died on July 21st, 2006, after a battle with esophageal cancer. This episode, which aired less than 3 months after his death, was the last one to feature his voice performance. The dedication is quiet, 4 words on a black screen, and the weight of it, the real-world grief layered on top of the fictional grief, makes the moment almost unbearable. What makes this scene essential to the show's larger argument about darkness is what it reveals about Iroh himself. He is the most beloved character in the series. He is wise, gentle, generous, patient. He is everyone's favourite uncle. And he is also a man who once led an army to conquer a city and lost his child in the process. The kindness he shows in the present is not separate from the violence of his past. It is a response to it. Every cup of tea he pours, every bit of advice he gives, every time he steers Zuko away from anger and towards something better, he is doing it because he could not steer his own son away from the war that killed him. The gentleness is not who Iroh always was. It is who he became after the worst thing that could happen to a person happened to him. The show never lets you forget this. It never lets Iroh be simply wise. It insists that his wisdom was purchased with a price most people cannot imagine paying, and it trusts you to hold both things at once: the warmth and the wound, the tea and the war, the man who makes you laugh and the father who climbs a hill alone to sing to a picture of a dead child. There is a version of this show that would have treated Iroh as comic relief and nothing more. There is a version that would have given him a tragic backstory in a single line of dialogue and moved on. The show does neither. It gives him an entire vignette, almost entirely wordless in its most devastating moments, and it lets the weight of his grief press down on every kind thing he did that day, retroactively rewriting every smile as a function of loss. Appa's Lost Days is the 16th episode of Book 2. It aired on October 13th, 2006, one episode after the Tales of Ba Sing Se, and it is an episode that should not work. The entire story follows a sky bison who cannot speak. There is almost no dialogue. The protagonist is an animal, and it is one of the most harrowing episodes in the entire series. Appa was kidnapped by sandbenders in the previous arc. Team Avatar has been searching for him across Ba Sing Se. This episode rewinds to the moment of the kidnapping and follows Appa's journey from that point forward. He is traded from the sandbenders to beetle-headed merchants and then sold to a Fire Nation circus. The circus trainer is introduced with a veneer of sympathy, speaking softly to Appa as if he cares about him. Within seconds, it becomes clear that the trainer's goal is to break Appa. He withholds food. He threatens Appa with fire. He forces Appa to perform tricks for an audience, flying through burning hoops while the crowd cheers. There is a small boy in the audience. His father is dismissive and harsh, refusing to share food with the child, ordering him not to move. The parallel is drawn without a single word. The boy is being controlled by his father, the way Appa is being controlled by the trainer. The boy disobeys his father long enough to push hay closer to Appa, so the starving bison can eat. And later, when Appa fights back against the trainer and prepares to escape, the boy whispers encouragement. The child who is being mistreated recognizes the animal who is being mistreated, and the connection between them is the only genuinely kind thing that happens in the entire first act of the episode. After escaping the circus, Appa's journey becomes a litany of suffering. He returns to the desert where the library sank and finds nothing. He fights buzzard wasps and collapses from exhaustion. He wanders into a farmer's barn for food and water and is chased out with a pitchfork and a torch. He fights a boar cupine and is badly wounded by its quills. At every turn, the world hurts him. The Kyoshi warriors, led by Suki, find him and nurse him back to health. For a brief window, the episode offers relief. Appa is cared for, his wounds are tended, his trust begins to return. And then Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee arrive, attacking the Kyoshi warriors. Fire is everywhere, the thing Appa fears most since the circus trainer threatened him with it. Suki, seeing that Appa is paralyzed by terror, deliberately uses fire to scare him away. To force him to fly to safety, she saves his life by weaponizing his trauma. The episode won a Genesis Award from the Humane Society of the United States for its depiction of animal cruelty. That is a real award given to a children's animated television show about a fictional six-legged sky bison, because the show's depiction of what happens when an animal is separated from the person who loves it, sold into captivity, abused into compliance, and then forced to navigate a hostile world alone, was specific and honest enough to earn recognition from an organization dedicated to the real-world prevention of exactly those things. What the episode does that makes it more than a sad animal story is the dream sequence. At his lowest point, Appa dreams of the day he met Aang. At the Eastern Air Temple, a young Aang offered Appa an apple, and the bison chose him. They bonded for life. In the show's mythology, the bond between an air nomad and their sky bison is sacred, a partnership that lasts a lifetime, and the show places this memory, this moment of pure connection and joy, inside an episode defined by its absence. The dream is not comfort, it is torture. It is a reminder of everything Appa has lost. When Appa finally reaches Ba Sing Se, guided by a message from Guru Pathik, he hears a bison whistle. He believes it is Aang. He lands, and Long Feng captures him, using the whistle as bait, adding the last link in a chain that stretches from desert to circus, to battlefield to cage. The episode ends with Appa imprisoned again, and the show holds on that image, and the silence says everything the episode cannot. The show won a Genesis Award from the Humane Society of the United States for Appa's Lost Days. That is worth pausing on. An animated program on a children's network depicting a fictional six-legged sky bison earned recognition from a real-world animal welfare organization because the specificity of its depiction of animal cruelty was honest enough to warrant it. The show did not show blood. It did not show graphic injury. It showed an animal being starved, threatened with fire, caged, separated from the person who loves it, and forced to perform for a crowd that does not care about its suffering. And it did it well enough that the Humane Society said, yes, this matters. There is a structural decision the show makes with Appa's story that is easy to overlook. The episode airs immediately after the tales of Ba Sing Se, immediately after Iroh sings to his dead son's picture and makes the audience cry. The show follows the gentlest, most human episode in its entire run, with the harshest, most animalistic. It places the man who lost his son next to the bison who lost his boy. The grief is the same, the love is the same, the loss is the same, and the show does not need to spell out the parallel because the juxtaposition does the work. This is what loss looks like when it has words. This is what loss looks like when it does not. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Crossroads of Destiny, the 20th and final episode of Book 2. It aired on December 1st, 2006. Written by Aaron Ihas, and it is the episode in which the show breaks its own hero. The setup is this. Azula has infiltrated Ba Sing Se with Mai, Ty Lee, and the Dai Li agents she has recruited. She has staged a coup. Long Feng believes he is in control, but Azula outmaneuvers him with a single glance, asserting dominance over the Dai Li through sheer force of will. The Earth King is deposed. Ba Sing Se, the last great stronghold of the Earth Kingdom, falls, not from the outside, from within. The impenetrable walls held against 100 years of Fire Nation assault. The city fell to a 14-year-old girl who walked through the front gate. In the crystal catacombs beneath the city, Zuko and Katara are imprisoned together. The scene between them is quiet, almost tender. Katara, who has spent the entire series defining Zuko as the enemy, begins to see him differently. They share their losses. Both lost their mothers because of the Fire Nation. Katara offers to heal Zuko's scar with the spirit water from the North Pole Oasis, water she has been carrying since Book 1, water she has been saving for something important. The moment is one of genuine connection, and the show lets you feel it. And then Aang and Iroh arrive to rescue them, and Azula arrives with the Dai Li, and the choice presents itself. Zuko can side with Iroh and Aang, or he can side with Azula. The show has spent an entire season building toward this moment. Zuko has been changing. He freed Appa. He has been questioning his purpose. Iroh has been guiding him towards something better. Everything in the narrative is pointing toward the moment when Zuko chooses the right side. He does not. He sides with Azula. He turns on Iroh, the man who raised him, the man who loved him, the man who gave up everything to protect him. He fights alongside his sister against the Avatar, and in the final moments of the battle, Azula strikes Aang with lightning while he is in the Avatar state, and Aang falls. He does not just fall, he dies. Katara catches his body as it drops, and his eyes go dark, and the Avatar state, the unbroken chain of reincarnation that has connected every Avatar for thousands of years, is severed. Aang is dead. Katara uses the spirit water she had offered to Zuko to bring Aang back, the water she was saving, the one thing she had that was irreplaceable. She pours it onto Aang's body and pulls him back from death. The cost is clear. She cannot heal Zuko's scar now. She cannot heal anything else now. The one-time resource is spent, and the thing she bought with it is a reprieve, not a resolution. Aang is alive, but the Avatar state is broken, and Ba Sing Se has fallen, and the Earth Kingdom is shattered, and the group flees on Appa with an unconscious, barely breathing Aang. The season ends there. No victory, no resolution, no hope. The camera pulls back to show the Fire Nation flag rising over Ba Sing Se. The war is not just ongoing, it is being lost, and the show leaves its audience, many of them children, with an image of their hero dead in his friend's arms, brought back by a miracle that cannot happen again. Zuko's betrayal in this episode is the moment the show commits fully to its darkest argument about human nature. Zuko is not a villain. He has been shown repeatedly to be capable of goodness, of compassion, of moral clarity. He spoke out against sacrificing soldiers. He freed Appa. He is trying, in his stumbling, angry way, to be better, and he still chooses wrong. He still sides with the sister who manipulates him, because the pull of his father's approval, the need to go home, the desire to be wanted by the person whose rejection defines him, is stronger than the thing he knows is right. The show does not condemn him for this. It does not excuse him either. It simply shows you a boy who was given a choice between what was right and what was comfortable, and chose comfort, and will spend the next 20 episodes paying for it. Iroh is arrested because of Zuko's betrayal. The man who loved Zuko more than anyone alive is thrown into a Fire Nation prison because Zuko handed him over, and the show lets you sit with that. Zuko returns to the Fire Nation a hero. He has everything he said he wanted. His father acknowledges him. His honor is restored. He sits at the royal table, and none of it fills the hole, because the thing Zuko actually wanted was never his father's approval. It was his father's love, and his father does not have any love to give. Ozai is incapable of it. The approval Zuko receives is conditional, transactional, and hollow, and Zuko knows it, and the knowing eats him alive for the first half of Book 3. The Day of Black Sun, Part 2, The Eclipse, the 11th episode of Book 3. It aired on November 30th, 2007. The invasion of the Fire Nation, planned for months, built around the fact that firebenders lose their power during a solar eclipse, has failed. Aang could not find Ozai. The eclipse is ending. The invasion force is being overwhelmed. And while all of this is happening, Zuko walks into his father's underground bunker. He walks in alone. He tells Ozai he is leaving. He tells him he is going to join the Avatar. And then, with the eclipse still dimming the sky, with Ozai temporarily unable to firebend, Zuko says the things he has been carrying since he was 13 years old. He tells his father that the scar was not a lesson in respect. It was cruelty. He tells him that he had to learn everything on his own, that his father taught him nothing worth learning. He tells him that the Fire Nation's war is wrong. Ozai listens. And then the eclipse begins to end and the light starts returning, and Ozai's first act when his bending returns is to generate lightning and fire it at his own son, not as a lesson, not as discipline, as a killing blow. The man looks at the boy who just told him the truth and tries to end his life. Zuko redirects the lightning. Iroh taught him this technique, drawing from water-bending principles, creating a path through the body that channels the energy safely. The lightning enters through one hand, passes through his stomach, and exits through the other, blasting a hole in the wall behind Ozai. It is the first time in the series that Zuko has ever stood up to his father and survived, and the cost of it, the emotional cost, is visible on his face. He does not look triumphant, he looks exhausted. He looks like a boy who just set down something he has been carrying for years, and is not sure he can stand up under his own weight anymore. The scene works because of everything the show has invested in the relationship between Zuko and Ozai across 3 seasons. Ozai appears in the show remarkably little. For most of the first 2 seasons, his face is not even shown. He is a silhouette, a voice, a shadow on the wall. The show understood that the less you see of a monster, the bigger it becomes. Ozai's first full appearance, face visible, body in frame, does not come until late in Book 3, and when you finally see him, he is exactly what you expected, and somehow worse. A handsome, composed, articulate man who burns children and calls it discipline. The banality of his cruelty is its most disturbing quality. He does not rage. He does not lose control. He hurts people the way other people sign documents. This is important because it reframes Zuko's entire arc. Zuko has been chasing the approval of a man who would kill him without hesitation if it served his interests. The quest that defined 2 seasons of television, the search for the Avatar, was never about honor. It was about a child trying to earn love from someone who does not experience love. The impossible task Ozai gave Zuko, capturing a being that had not been seen in 100 years, was never meant to be completed. It was designed to remove Zuko from the equation permanently, to send him on a chase that would keep him away from the Fire Nation forever. When Zuko finally accepts this, which takes him until the day of Black Sun, the acceptance does not feel like liberation. It feels like mourning. He is not choosing to be brave. He is choosing to stop pretending. And the show treats the difference between those 2 things as critically important. After leaving his father, Zuko goes to the prison where Iroh is being held. He has come to apologize. He has come to beg forgiveness for the betrayal in the Crystal Catacombs. And when he arrives at the cell, Iroh is gone. He bent the bars apart. He escaped on his own, without Zuko's help during the eclipse. The man Zuko betrayed did not wait to be rescued. He freed himself. Zuko does not reconnect with Iroh until the final episodes. When they meet again, in the camp of the Order of the White Lotus, Zuko stands outside Iroh's tent. Unable to go in, he tells Katara he is afraid, not of what Iroh will say, of what Iroh will feel. He is afraid that the man who loved him like a son will no longer love him, because Zuko chose wrong, and the choosing broke something that might not be fixable. Iroh embraces him. The forgiveness is immediate, total, and wordless. And Zuko breaks down in his arms, and the camera holds on 2 people hugging in a military camp, and the weight of everything that led to this moment, every betrayal, and every moment of growth and every step forward and backward, presses down on the image until it becomes almost too heavy to watch. The Southern Raiders, which aired on July 17, 2008, takes this emotional architecture and applies it to Katara. The episode is, in structural terms, Katara's equivalent of Zuko's confrontation with Ozai. She is going to face the man who killed her mother, and the show does not let her off easy. Zuko is the one who enables the journey. He knows how the Fire Nation military communicates. He knows how to track a retired Southern Raiders officer. He offers to take Katara to find Yon-Ra, the man who murdered Kaya. Aang objects. He tells Katara that revenge is not the answer, that forgiveness is stronger than violence. He cites the teachings of the monks, the very philosophy that defines his identity as the last airbender. And Katara, who has spent the entire series being the compassionate one, the caretaker, the moral centre, looks at Aang and tells him that this is different, that the monks' teachings do not apply here, that he does not understand. The show lets Katara be wrong in her certainty and right in her pain. It does not take a side. Aang's pacifism is genuine and principled. Katara's rage is genuine and earned. The show places these two positions next to each other and refuses to arbitrate. On the way to find Yon-Ra, Katara remembers. The flashback is detailed. She was 8 years old. She saw the black snow falling, which in the southern water tribe signals the approach of Fire Nation ships. She ran home. She found her mother in their tent with a Fire Nation soldier. Kaya told Katara to leave. To find her father, Katara ran. By the time she returned with her coda, Kaya was dead. The show reveals, through Zuko's interrogation of the current Southern Raiders commander, that Yon-Ra retired 4 years earlier. He lives with his mother. He grows vegetables. He is pathetic. And when Katara and Zuko find him, walking home from the market in the rain, Katara confronts him, and Yon-Ra does something that the show frames as the final insult. He does not remember her. He does not recognize the daughter of the woman he killed. It takes him a moment to place the face, to recall the raid, to connect this furious young waterbender with the 8-year-old girl he saw for a few seconds 6 years ago. Katara's defining trauma is, for Yon-Ra, a half-forgotten afternoon. Katara stops the rain around him. She bends it into ice. She creates daggers of frozen water and sends them toward his face. And she stops. She does not kill him. She looks at him, this diminished, cowardly man who begs for his life and even offers to sacrifice his own mother to survive, and she walks away. The show does not frame this as forgiveness. When Katara returns to the group, Aang tells her he is proud of her for choosing the right thing, and Katara says clearly and without ambiguity that she did not forgive Yon-Ra. She will never forgive him. What she chose was not to become what he is. That is a different thing from forgiveness, and the show is careful to maintain the distinction. She does forgive Zuko. After the journey, after facing the man who killed her mother with the boy she once defined as the enemy, Katara finally lets Zuko in. The embrace they share at the end of the episode is the resolution of an arc that spans the entire series, and it is built not on Zuko proving himself through heroism, but on Zuko proving himself through understanding. He did not tell her to forgive. He did not tell her what to feel. He took her where she needed to go and let her feel what she needed to feel, and the respect implicit in that. The recognition that her pain belongs to her and not to anyone else's moral framework is what earns her trust. And then Zuko turns to Aang and asks a question that the show has been building toward for 60 episodes. He asks Aang what he is going to do when he faces the Fire Lord. Aang looks away. He does not answer. The episode ends on his silence, and the silence carries more weight than any answer could, because the question is not strategic. It is existential. Aang has just watched Katara choose not to kill the man who murdered her mother. He knows that his own moment is coming. He knows the world expects him to kill Ozai, and he does not know if he can. This is what the show means when it talks about darkness. Not violence, not gore, not shock. The darkness in Avatar is the gap between what people want and what they settle for. It is the distance between who they could be and who they allow themselves to become. It is the specific, precise pain of watching a person who knows better choose worse, and understanding exactly why they did it, and knowing that the understanding does not make it hurt less. There is a scene in The Beach, the 5th episode of Book 3, which aired on October 19th, 2007, that distills this into a single moment. The episode is set on Ember Island, where Zuko, Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee are taking a vacation that none of them know how to take. They are teenagers from the most powerful family in the world, and they are incapable of normal human interaction. They go to a party and alienate everyone there. They sit on a beach and, in a scene that functions as a group therapy session, confess the things that drive them. Ty Lee goes first. Her confession is that she has 6 identical sisters and spent her entire childhood being treated as interchangeable. She joined the circus not for the acrobatics, but because it was the first place she was ever treated as an individual. Her bubbly, attention-seeking personality is not vanity. It is the desperation of a person who is never seen as a singular being and will do anything to be noticed. Mai goes next. She was raised in a political household where her father's career depended on her being quiet, presentable, and invisible. She was trained to not have feelings. She was groomed for a life of strategic silence. Her emotional flatness, which the show has been playing as deadpan humour for an entire season, is not a personality. It is a survival strategy. She does not feel nothing. She She has been taught that feeling is dangerous. Zuko screams at the ocean. He admits he is angry, and he does not know why. He has everything he wanted. His father has accepted him. His honor has been restored. And he is angrier than he has ever been, because getting what he wanted revealed that what he wanted was not what he needed, and the thing he needs, his father cannot give him. Azula, in this same scene, says something that the show frames as a joke, but that lands like a knife. She tells the group essentially that her own mother thought she was a monster. She says it lightly. She says it the way someone who has repeated a fact so many times it has lost its weight says it. And then she adds that her mother was right, that she is a monster, but that being a monster is something she has learned to accept. The delivery is casual, the content is devastating. A 14-year-old girl has absorbed her mother's perceived rejection and reframed it as identity. She is not hurt by being called a monster. She has become the monster, because becoming it was easier than being wounded by it. The Beach is remarkable because it takes 4 villains, or at least 4 characters positioned as antagonists, and makes you understand every single one of them in the space of a few minutes around a campfire. The show does not ask you to forgive them, it asks you to see them, and seeing them is worse than fearing them, because once you see, you cannot unsee, and every act of cruelty that follows carries the weight of the confession that preceded it. When Azula manipulates someone in a later episode, you remember the girl on the beach who said her mother thought she was a monster. When Mai betrays Azula at the Boiling Rock, you remember the girl who was taught to not have feelings, finally having one strong enough to override her programming. The confessions do not excuse anything, they contextualize everything. The show tracks Azula's unraveling from this point forward. After Mai and Ty Lee betray her at the Boiling Rock, turning on her to save Zuko, Azula's final pillars of stability crumble. She controlled her friends through fear, and now her friends have demonstrated that their fear of her is not infinite. She controlled her brother through superiority, and now her brother has defected. Her father names her Fire Lord, and then leaves to wage his final campaign without her, which is not an honor, it is an abandonment dressed as a promotion. Ozai does not trust Azula to fight beside him. He trusts her to sit on a throne and wait. Mai's betrayal is the trigger. When Azula asks Mai why she did it, why she saved Zuko instead of obeying Azula, Mai says something simple and devastating. She says, essentially, that she loves Zuko more than she fears Azula, the equation that has governed Azula's entire approach to relationships. The belief that fear is a more reliable tool than love is disproven in a single sentence, and Azula cannot process it. She cannot absorb the idea that someone would choose love over fear, because in her world, in the world her father built for her, love is conditional and fear is constant. The idea that someone might value a person more than they value their own safety is, for Azula, a kind of insanity, and so she concludes that Mai is insane, not that her own worldview is broken. Ty Lee's betrayal is even worse. Ty Lee, the most compliant, the most eager to please, the one who followed Azula out of genuine admiration as much as fear, strikes Azula with chai blocking to save Mai. She paralyzes the most powerful firebender of her generation with a series of quick strikes that shut down her bending. The person who worshipped Azula chose, in the moment that mattered, to stop her. Both friends are thrown into prison, and Azula is left with no one. The word alone does different things to different characters in this show. For Zuko, being alone is a test he passes by learning to function without approval. For Aang, being alone is a fear he carries from the moment he woke up in the ice. For Iroh, being alone is the default state he has inhabited since Lu Ten died, and his response has been to build connections everywhere he goes, to pour tea for strangers, to treat every conversation as a chance to create something where his son's absence left a vacuum. For Azula, being alone is annihilation. She has never been alone. She has always had subjects, soldiers, agents, friends she controlled through intimidation. Take them all away, and there is nothing underneath. No self that exists independent of power over others. In the final episodes of the series, Sozin's Comet, which aired as a 4-part television film on July 19th, 2008, Azula's breakdown is depicted with a specificity that is almost clinical. She banishes servants for minor infractions. A cherry cherry pit left in a cherry is enough to get a servant dismissed. She fires the Daily agents who had been loyal to her because they arrived 5 minutes late, a standard she would not have applied a month earlier, an impossible standard designed not to maintain discipline but to ensure failure, because failure gives her a reason to act, and acting is the only thing that keeps the silence at bay. She banishes one of the twin advisors, Lo and Lee, and cannot remember which one she banished. The confusion is significant. Azula has always been precise. She has always been in control of details. The inability to distinguish between two people she has known her entire life is not a mistake. It is a symptom. She cuts her own hair with fire bending in front of a mirror, and the reflection staring back at her morphs into her mother's face, and Azula screams at it, demanding to know why her mother is always watching, always judging. The mirror scene is one of the most discussed moments in the entire series, and the reason it works is the restraint surrounding it. The show does not explain what is happening to Azula. It does not label it. It does not have another character say she is losing her mind. It shows you a girl who has maintained absolute control over every aspect of her life, who has been trained from birth to suppress vulnerability and project strength, and it shows you what happens when every source of that strength is removed at once. The control does not crack gradually, it shatters. When Zuko and Katara arrive to confront her, she challenges Zuko to an Agni Kai, and Zuko accepts, because he can see that she is not herself. The fight that follows is scored differently from every other fight in the series. The music is not triumphant, it is mournful. The animation is operatic, with sweeping flames of orange and blue filling the screen, and the choreography is beautiful and brutal, and the emotional register is not excitement, it is sadness. Zuko is winning. Azula is powerful but erratic, her control slipping, her movements wild where they were once precise. She generates lightning, and Zuko prepares to redirect it, and then she changes her target. She fires the lightning at Katara. Zuko throws himself in front of it. He manages to redirect some of the energy, but not all of it, and the lightning tears through his body and drops him to the ground. Katara fights Azula alone. She is outmatched in raw power, but Azula is unhinged, and Katara is resourceful, and the fight ends when Katara lures Azula over a grate covering a water channel, freezes the water around both of them, then melts just enough to free herself while chaining Azula to the grate, and then the show gives you the image. Azula, chained to a metal grate, on her hands and knees, sobbing, not screaming, not raging, sobbing. The fire in her breath comes and goes in ragged bursts. Her hair is hanging in her face. She is not a villain in this moment. She is a 14-year-old girl whose father used her, whose mother left her, whose friends abandoned her, and whose brother, the one person left who might have reached her, is lying wounded on the ground because she tried to kill the only person who showed him kindness. The camera holds. It does not cut away. It does not give you a cathartic moment of triumph. It gives you this, a broken child chained and crying, and the knowledge that everything she is, every terrible thing she has done, was built on a foundation of a father who treated his children as instruments, and a mother who could not save either of them. Azula is not a monster, she is a casualty, and the show makes sure you know it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is an episode near the end of the series that is, in some ways, the most revealing of all, not for what it adds, but for what it reflects. The Ember Island Players, Book 3, Episode 17. It aired on July 18th, 2008, the day before the series finale. Written by Tim Hedrick, Joshua Hamilton, and John O'Brien. In this episode, Team Avatar attends a play about themselves, performed by a theatre troupe on Ember Island that has a reputation for butchering their source material. The play is a comedic recap of the entire series, performed by actors who exaggerate every character trait into parody. Aang is played by a woman. Katara is constantly crying and giving speeches about hope. Sokka is reduced to his jokes. Toph is played by a large man who screams. Zuko is melodramatic. and the events of the show are condensed, distorted, and reframed through Fire Nation propaganda, so that the ending shows Ozai victorious and the Avatar dead. The episode is funny, it is self-aware, it is the show looking in a mirror and laughing at its reflection. But underneath the comedy, the episode is doing something else entirely. It is showing the characters their own story from the outside, and the gap between how they experience their lives and how the world tells their story is enormous and painful. Katara watches an actress portray her as a weeping idealist who talks about hope every other sentence, and she is visibly embarrassed. But the embarrassment is instructive. Katara does talk about hope. She does cry. She does give speeches. And those things are not weaknesses. They are the tools she used to hold her group together through 3 seasons of escalating trauma. The play turns her compassion into a punchline, and the discomfort she feels watching it is the discomfort of seeing something genuine reduced to something ridiculous. Zuko watches an actor portray his arc as a simple redemption narrative, honor lost and honor found, and the oversimplification grates on him because the real version involved 3 years of agony, betrayal, self-destruction, and the hardest moral choices the show depicts. The play makes it look easy. The reality was the opposite. And then there is Jet. The play includes a scene where the actor playing Jet is crushed by a boulder after being brainwashed, and the characters in the audience look at each other, uncertain. Zuko asks if Jet died. Sokka says his death was really unclear. It is a joke. It is also a direct acknowledgement by the show's writers that they killed a teenager on screen and were constrained by their network from confirming it explicitly. The joke is the show pointing at its own limitation, the boundary imposed by being a children's program on Nickelodeon, and admitting that the darkness it depicted was sometimes limited not by what the creators wanted to say, but by what they were permitted to show. The Ember Island Players is the show's thesis statement about the relationship between a story and its audience. The play within the show is bad. It misses the point. It reduces complex people to caricatures and complicated events to spectacle. But the audience in the theatre is cheering. They love it. They love the version of the story that is simple and flat and wrong. And Team Avatar, sitting in the audience watching their lives be distorted, is the show asking you, the viewer, whether you are going to be the audience that cheers or the audience that sees. The question is not rhetorical. The show has spent 3 seasons giving you the tools to see what the play misses. The play does not include Iroh weeping on a hill. It does not include Harma in her cell, practicing on rats. It does not include Azula on the beach saying her mother thought she was a monster. It does not include any of the moments where the show's darkness is not spectacle, but psychology, not plot, but pain. The play includes the fireworks. The show included the grief. And the episode, by placing them side by side, is asking you to understand that the grief is the whole point. The darkness is not something the show did to you. It is something the show trusted you with. The Ember Island Players episode drew 4.53 million viewers when it aired. The series finale the following day drew 5.59 million. Those numbers mean that millions of people watched the show laugh at its own darkness, and then came back the next day to watch the darkness conclude. They came back because the show had earned them. Because by episode 57, the audience was not watching for spectacle. They were watching because the show had looked at them and said, "You can handle this. You are old enough, smart enough, brave enough to hold this story with all its weight, all its grief, all its unflinching honesty about what the world does to children who are caught in the machinery of adults who cannot stop waging war." And the audience said yes. Underneath everything in Avatar, The Last Airbender, beneath every character arc and battle and betrayal, there is a single event that the show refuses to show you directly. The Air Nomad genocide, the annihilation of an entire civilization, timed to coincide with the arrival of Sozin's comet, which amplified the power of firebenders to a scale that made resistance impossible. The Fire Nation attacked all 4 air temples simultaneously. Every air nomad was killed. Every man, woman, and child. Every elder, every infant, every monk and nun, and student and teacher. The temples were not just conquered, they were emptied. The bison were slaughtered, the culture was erased. The libraries, the artifacts, the traditions that had been passed down for thousands of years, all of it gone in a single day. The show tells you this in the 3rd episode and then spends 60 more episodes letting you understand what it means. It does not show the genocide, it shows its absence. Empty halls, silent courtyards, skeletons wearing robes, a world that has a shape where an entire people used to be, and the shape is exactly the right size to make you feel the scale of what was removed. Aang visits 3 of the 4 air temples over the course of the series. Each one is empty, each one has been repurposed or abandoned or decayed. The Northern Air Temple, in Book 1, Episode 17, which aired on November 4th, 2005, has been colonised by a group of non-bending refugees and an inventor who has retrofitted the sacred architecture with machinery. Aang is horrified. The temple where monks once trained is now a factory. The statues are chipped and reassembled. The murals are painted over, and the show places Aang's horror alongside the refugees' genuine need. And it does not resolve the tension. The refugees needed a home. The inventor needed space. The temple was empty. From their perspective, they are not desecrating anything. From Aang's perspective, they are living in a graveyard and do not know it. The Western Air Temple, in Book 3, Episode 12, which aired on July 14th, 2008, is where Zuko comes to join Team Avatar. It is built upside down, hanging from the underside of a cliff. It is spectacular and empty. The show uses its architecture as a metaphor. Everything is inverted. The hero who was a villain arrives at a temple that hangs beneath the ground, asking for acceptance from the people he has spent 2 years trying to capture. The setting is a dead civilization's masterpiece, and the conversation happening inside it is about whether a child of the nation that killed this civilization can be trusted. The show returns to the Southern Air Temple one final time in the episode The Avatar and the Fire Lord, the 6th episode of Book 3, which aired on October 26, 2007, written by Elizabeth Welch Ehas. This episode tells the story of Avatar Roku and Fire Lord Sozin, who grew up as friends, drifted apart over ideology, and ultimately destroyed each other. Roku and Sozin played together as children. They were best friends. And Sozin's belief in the Fire Nation's right to share its prosperity with the world, which Roku recognized as imperialism, dressed in the language of generosity, drove them apart. When Roku confronted Sozin, the conflict escalated until Sozin left Roku to die on a volcanic island, consumed by the eruption that Roku had been trying to contain. The episode is structured as a dual narrative, told simultaneously by Roku through his connection with Aang and by Sozin through his memoirs, which Zuko discovers. The 2 stories converge on the same events, seen from opposite perspectives, and the effect is devastating because both perspectives are internally consistent. Sozin genuinely believed the Fire Nation was the most prosperous civilization in the world, and that its people had a moral obligation to share that prosperity. Roku genuinely believed that the 4 nations must remain separate, that balance requires diversity, that no single nation has the right to impose its values on others. Neither is lying, neither is stupid. They are 2 people who love each other and who cannot reconcile their visions of the world. And the failure to reconcile is not a failure of intelligence or character. It is a failure of imagination. Neither can imagine a world where the other person's vision does not lead to catastrophe. This is perhaps the single most mature piece of political storytelling in the entire series. The show takes imperialism, the primary real-world analogue for the Fire Nation's war, and it does not reduce it to moustache-twirling evil. It shows you a young man who is charming, intelligent, and genuinely devoted to his friend. And it shows you how that man's genuine belief in his own civilization's superiority leads, step by step, decision by decision, to genocide. Sozin did not wake up one morning and decide to destroy the air nomads. He spent decades convincing himself that the Fire Nation's way was the best way, that resistance to its expansion was misguided, that the casualties along the way were the unfortunate but necessary cost of progress. By the time the comet arrived, the genocide was not a break from Sozin's worldview. It was the logical endpoint of it. The connection to the genocide is explicit. Sozin killed his best friend. And then, with the Avatar out of the way and the comet approaching, he ordered the destruction of the air nomads. The genocide was not an impulsive act of war. It was the final step in a plan that began with the murder of the one person who could have stopped it, and the show places this story inside a frame that makes it personal for both Aang and Zuko. Zuko learns in this episode that Avatar Roku is his maternal great-grandfather. The man who tried to stop the war and the man who started it are both in Zuko's bloodline. He carries both legacies. The fire that burned the air nomads and the fire that tried to protect them are both in his veins. Iroh tells Zuko that the dual heritage means he alone understands the struggle between the two halves of the Fire Nation's soul. The nation that produced both Roku's compassion and Sozin's ambition. The nation that created beauty and waged destruction. Zuko is the living embodiment of both, and the choice between them is one he must make not once but every day for the rest of his life. This reframes Zuko's entire arc. He is not just a boy trying to redeem himself, he is a boy trying to resolve a contradiction that has been burning inside his family and his nation for over a century. The episode ends with one of the show's most quietly powerful revelations. Aang asks Roku why he is showing him this story. Roku says that Aang needs to understand that the Fire Nation is not inherently evil, that Sozin was not born a monster, that good people can do terrible things when they convince themselves the ends justify the means. This is not a platitude, it is a strategic briefing. Roku is telling Aang that when he faces Ozai, he will not be facing a demon, he will be facing a man, a human being who chose wrong again and again until the choices hardened into a path, and the path led to war, and the war led to genocide. And the only way to end it is not to destroy the man, but to stop the path. The genius of how Avatar handles the genocide is that it never lets it become abstract. Every empty temple is a specific place. Every dead monk was a specific person. Gyatso, the man who taught Aang to laugh, who played games with him, who tried to protect his childhood, fought back. The show reveals this in the third episode through the image of Gyatso's skeleton, surrounded by the remains of Fire Nation soldiers. He did not go quietly, he did not accept it, and he still died. The genocide echoes through every season in ways both obvious and subtle. Aang is the last airbender. He is also the last practitioner of a martial art, the last speaker of a set of traditions, the last person alive who remembers what the air nomads sounded like when they laughed. Every time he teaches someone an air nomad saying, every time he celebrates a holiday no one else remembers, every time he insists on vegetarianism because his culture taught him to value all life, he is performing an act of cultural preservation that is also an act of mourning. He is keeping alive a civilization that exists nowhere else except inside his memory. And the show understands the weight of that. It understands that cultural survival for a sole survivor is not a gift. It is a responsibility so enormous that it presses on every decision, every relationship, every quiet moment. The air nomads believed in detachment. They believed in freedom. They believed that the spirit and the body are temporary, and that clinging to the material world is the source of suffering. And their sole surviving representative is a 12-year-old boy who clings fiercely to the people he loves, who fights desperately to protect the physical world, who is terrified of losing anyone else. Aang is not a good air nomad by the standards of the culture that raised him. He is too attached. He loves too much. He holds on too tightly. And the show suggests, gently but persistently, that this is precisely why he is the right avatar for this moment. The air nomad's philosophy of detachment was beautiful and true, and also, in the face of annihilation, insufficient. Aang's attachment, his desperate, clinging, terrified love for the people around him, is the thing that keeps him going when the philosophy alone would have let him stop. The genocide is the foundation of the show's darkness, but it is also the foundation of its moral argument. Aang, the sole survivor, is expected to restore balance to the world that murdered his people. He is expected to forgive. He is expected to find a way forward that does not involve destroying the Fire Nation in return. And the show takes this expectation seriously. It does not treat forgiveness as easy or obvious. It does not frame Aang's refusal to kill Ozai as naive idealism. It frames it as the hardest moral choice a person can make. To look at the nation that wiped out your entire civilization and say, "I will not do to them what they did to us." In the final battle, Aang faces Ozai during Sozin's comet, and Ozai is at his most powerful, his firebending amplified 100-fold. The fight is enormous, city-destroying, world-shaking, and Aang wins. He wins by discovering energy bending, a technique taught to him by a lion turtle that allows him to remove Ozai's ability to firebend without killing him. It is, on the surface, a convenient solution, but the show earns it by showing you what Aang considered and rejected. He considered killing Ozai. His past lives told him to do it. Roku, Kyoshi, Kuruk, Yang Chen, all of them, including the air nomad Avatar, advised him to end Ozai's life, and Aang said no, not because it was easy, because the air nomads valued all life, and Aang is the last air nomad, and if he kills Ozai, then the last remnant of a people who believed in the sacredness of life will have abandoned that belief. The genocide would have won, not just in the destruction of his people, but in the destruction of what his people stood for. The moment before Aang discovers energy bending is one of the most important in the series. He is meditating on a floating island that is actually the back of a lion turtle, an ancient creature older than the Avatar cycle itself. The lion turtle speaks to him and says essentially that in the era before the Avatar, people did not bend the elements, they bent the energy within themselves. The technique is presented as something older than bending, more fundamental, more dangerous. To use it, Aang must be unbendable in his own spirit. If Ozai's will overpowers his own, Aang's spirit will be destroyed. The final confrontation is not a fight, it is a contest of will. Aang places his hands on Ozai's forehead and chest and reaches into him, and for a long moment the screen shows two energies, one blue and one red, warring inside a shared space. Ozai's energy nearly consumes Aang's. The red overtakes the blue. The shot suggests that Aang is losing, that the man who burned his own son, who ordered a continent destroyed, who inherited a genocide and tried to finish the job, is stronger in will than the boy who was raised by monks to believe in peace. And then the blue pushes back. Aang's energy spreads through Ozai's body and extinguishes his bending. Ozai collapses. He is alive. He is unhurt. He simply cannot firebend anymore. The most powerful firebender in the world has been reduced to a man who cannot light a candle. The show does not present this as easy. It does not present it as painless. The philosophical objection that Aang found a loophole that let him avoid the hard choice is valid on the surface, but collapses under the weight of what the show has established about Aang's relationship to his culture. Every other Avatar told Aang to kill Ozai. The combined wisdom of 10,000 years of incarnated spiritual authority said, end him, and Aang, a 12-year-old boy carrying the memory of an exterminated civilization on his back, said no. He found another way, not because the other way was easier, because the other way was the only one that honored the people he lost. The show positions this as the ultimate answer to the darkness it has been building for 60 episodes. The war made Hama into a bloodbender. The war made Jet into a terrorist. The war made Azula into a weapon that destroyed herself. The war took Kia from Katara and Lu Ten from Iroh, and a childhood from every character in the series. And Aang's response to all of it, his response to the accumulated weight of 3 seasons of loss and cruelty and systemic violence, is to refuse to perpetuate the cycle, not to match destruction with destruction, not to let the war have the final word on what kind of person he is. The darkness did not break him, it refined him. And the refinement is not strength in the conventional sense. It is the strength to hold an impossible position when everyone around you, including the voices of the people who came before you, is telling you to let go. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show ends and the ending is warm. Aang and Katara stand on a balcony in Ba Sing Se, the city that was lost and has now been reclaimed. The sun is setting. Katara turns to Aang and they share a kiss. The music swells. The camera pulls back. The credits roll. And if you stop there, if you take the ending at face value, the show has delivered exactly what it promised. A story about a boy who saved the world. But if you hold all the darkness in your mind while you watch that final sunset, the image becomes something else entirely. It becomes a 12-year-old boy who is the last of his kind, who lost everyone he ever knew, who carries survivor's guilt like a second skeleton, who was struck dead by lightning and brought back by a miracle that cannot be repeated, standing next to a 14-year-old girl who watched her mother die to save her, who raised her brother, who was forced to learn a form of bending that violates everything she believes in, who used that bending in anger on an innocent man, and who spent the spirit water she was saving on the body of a boy she loves because there was no other choice. They are children. They have been through things that most adults in our world will never face. And they are standing in the sunset, kissing, and the music is telling you this is the ending, this is the resolution, this is the happily ever after. But the show has spent 61 episodes teaching you that there is no happily ever after. There is only what comes next. Zuko is Fire Lord now, and he has to rebuild a nation that spent 100 years waging a war of conquest. And the very first thing he does after his coronation is visit his father in prison and ask where his mother is, because even now, even after everything, the personal wound is still open and power has not healed it. Azula is in an institution and no one knows if she will ever recover. The sequel comics reveal that Zuko placed her there out of compassion rather than punishment, because he understood, in a way only a sibling can, that Azula's madness was not her fault. It was the logical result of being raised by a man who treated his children as instruments. But understanding the cause does not fix the damage. Some things, once broken, stay broken. Iroh is free, and he will open a tea shop called the Jasmine Dragon in Ba Sing Se, the city where his son died, the city he once besieged for 600 days, the city he helped liberate in the finale with the Order of the White Lotus. He will serve tea to people and smile, and the smile will be real, and the grief will be real, and neither one will cancel the other out. Toph will go home to parents who kept her in a cage of protectiveness because they could not see who she really was. Sokka will return to a southern water tribe that is rebuilding from decades of systematic destruction, carrying the memory of a girl who became the moon and a teenager who died under a lake. And Aang will spend the rest of his life as the Avatar, the bridge between worlds, the keeper of balance, the last airbender, carrying a culture that exists only in his memory and in whatever he can pass on to the next generation. The darkness in Avatar. The Last Airbender is not a feature that can be separated from the rest of the show. It is the rest of the show. Every joke lands harder because you know what these characters are carrying. Every moment of beauty is sharper because you know what was destroyed to make room for it. Every fight matters more because you know what is at stake. And what is at stake is not just a kingdom or a battle. It is the interior life of a child. It is the question of whether a 12-year-old can bear the weight of what the world asks of him without being crushed by it. The answer the show gives is yes, but the yes is conditional. The yes requires friends. The yes requires kindness. The yes requires a man who lost his own son choosing to protect someone else's child. The yes requires a girl who lost her mother choosing to care for the people around her instead of being consumed by her grief. The yes requires a blind earthbender who was hidden from the world, proving that the world cannot hide from her. The yes requires all of these things, and even with all of these things, the yes is fragile. It is provisional. It is the kind of yes that could shatter if one more thing goes wrong. That is what makes Avatar, The Last Airbender, not just a good show, but a great one. It does not lie to its audience about how the world works. It does not pretend that adventures are fun and consequences are someone else's problem. It looks at its audience, many of them young, many of them watching for the first time, and it says, the world is harder than you think, and darker than you hope, and more beautiful than you can imagine, and all of those things are true at the same time, and the only way through is together. 3 seasons, 61 episodes, a boy in the ice, a girl chained to a grate, and everything in between, every frame of it, built with a precision and a compassion that trust you to hold all of it, the light and the dark, the laughter and the grief at once. There is one more character whose story the show tells with a deceptive lightness that conceals something much harder. Toph Beifong. She is introduced in Book 2, Episode 6, The Blind Bandit, which aired on May 5th, 2006, and from the moment she appears, she is one of the most confident, competent, funny characters in the series. She is blind. She sees through earthbending, feeling vibrations in the ground to construct a perfect three-dimensional map of her surroundings. She is 12 years old, tiny, foul-mouthed, and possibly the most powerful earthbender alive. She joins Team Avatar and immediately becomes the group's engine of honesty, the person who says the thing nobody else will say. The show lets you enjoy all of this. It lets Toph be strong and funny and capable, and then gradually it fills in the background that produced her, and the background is not empowering, it is suffocating. Toph's parents, Lau and Poppy Beifong, are wealthy. They are protective, and they have spent Toph's entire life treating her blindness as a disability so severe that it requires constant containment. They do not let her leave the house unaccompanied. They do not let her train. They do not let anyone outside the family know that she exists. The Beifongs have a blind daughter, and their response to her blindness is to make her invisible, not out of cruelty, out of love. They love Toph. They also do not see her. They see their fear of what the world might do to a blind girl, and they have built a cage around that fear and put their daughter inside it. Toph's confidence, her ferocity, her refusal to be underestimated, all of it is a direct response to years of being told she is fragile. She became strong because the alternative was to accept a life defined by other people's assumptions about what she could not do. Her entire personality is an argument against the only people who were supposed to protect her, and the tragedy is that those people were not wrong to worry. The world is dangerous. A blind 12-year-old earthbender wandering through a war zone is, by any objective measure, at risk. But the show does not accept objective measures. It accepts Toph, and Toph has decided that the risk of living freely is preferable to the safety of being imprisoned by people who think they are doing you a favour. When Toph leaves her parents to join Aang, they do not understand. They send agents to retrieve her. The show frames this as villainy, and in narrative terms it is, but in emotional terms it is something more complicated. It is the grief of parents who cannot reconcile the daughter they raised with the daughter she actually is. They wanted to keep her safe. She wanted to be alive. Those are not the same thing, and the gap between them is where Toph's entire arc lives. The show builds a running motif around Toph's feet. She earthbends through her feet. She sees through her feet. Her connection to the ground is her connection to the world. And in the episode The Library, when Team Avatar descends into Wan Shi-tong's library, which is located in the middle of a desert, Toph stays outside with Appa because the sand does not transmit vibrations the way solid earth does. She cannot see in the desert. She is, for the only time in the series, truly blind. And this is the moment the Sandbenders choose to steal Appa. Toph tries to stop them while also holding the sinking library in place with her earthbending, and she cannot do both. She saves her friends but loses Appa, and the guilt of that, the knowledge that she was the one standing guard and she failed, follows her for the rest of the season. In the Desert, the 11th episode of Book 2, which aired on July 14th, 2006, Aang learns that Appa has been taken and enters a state of grief-fueled rage that nearly destroys everything around him. He enters the Avatar state. The winds pick up. The sand begins to swirl, and it is Katara who talks him down, who holds his hand, who absorbs the full force of his fury with nothing but her presence and her voice. But the moment before she reaches him, there is Toph, standing in the sand she cannot feel, unable to see, unable to help, unable to do the one thing she defines herself by. The desert strips away everything that makes Toph who she is and leaves her with nothing but her vulnerability. And the show holds on that, briefly, before letting the moment pass. This is the show's method. It gives every character moments of total exposure, moments where the thing they use to shield themselves is removed, and it forces them to exist without it. Aang without the Avatar state, Zuko without his anger, Katara without her hope, Iroh without his son, Toph without the earth. And in those moments you see who they actually are, stripped of armor, standing in the wind. The show does this because it understands something that most children's entertainment does not. The darkness is not what happens to the characters. The darkness is what the characters bring with them. Every person in Avatar, The Last Airbender, is carrying something. A dead parent, a missing mother, a scar, a memory of a genocide, a cage built by people who loved them, a skill that was born in a prison, an identity that was given to them before they were old enough to choose it. The war is the backdrop. The real subject is the weight, and the show's argument, the thing it builds across 3 seasons and 61 episodes with a patience and a discipline that are almost architectural, is that the weight is bearable, not light, not comfortable, not fair, bearable, but only if you do not carry it alone. The weight that crushes Azula, who had no one she could trust, does not crush Zuko because Iroh was there. The weight that nearly drowns Katara in vengeance does not drown her because Aang was there. The weight that threatens to break Aang every time he remembers what was lost does not break him because Katara and Sokka and Toph are there. The darkness in the show is real. The light is also real, and the show refuses to let either one cancel the other out. That is what the show asks of you, to hold it all at once. That is what the show asks of you, to hold it all at once. And if you can, then you understand something about Avatar, The Last Airbender, that no praise, however effusive, has ever quite captured. The show has been called one of the best animated series ever made. It has been called a masterpiece. It has been praised for its characters, its world building, its action sequences, its humour, its heart. All of that praise is accurate, and all of it is incomplete, because the thing that makes Avatar exceptional is not any of those individual elements. It is the relationship between them. It is the fact that the humour exists beside the horror, that the beauty exists beside the devastation, that the adventure exists beside the trauma, and that the show never lets any one of them overwhelm the others. The balance the show teaches its characters to pursue is the same balance the show itself achieves in its construction. It is a show about equilibrium that is itself perfectly equilibrated, and the darkness, the thing we have been tracing for the last 2 hours, is not the opposite of that balance. It is a necessary component of it. A show that gave you only light would be dishonest. A show that gave you only darkness would be cruel. Avatar gives you both in carefully calibrated measure, and it trusts that the combination, however painful, is truer than either extreme alone. The children who watched this show when it first aired are adults now. Many of them have returned to it. Many have found that it hits differently now, that the things they understood intuitively as children have sharpened into something clearer and more painful in adulthood. The show anticipated this. It was built for multiple viewings, for growing up alongside, for discovering new layers as your own experience of the world deepens. The darkness that a 10-year-old absorbs as plot, a 20-year-old recognizes as psychology, and a 30-year-old identifies as politics. The show contains all 3 readings simultaneously. It always did. It was never just a cartoon. It was never just a children's show. It was a work of art that happened to air on Nickelodeon between episodes of SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents. And it treated its time slot not as a limitation, but as an opportunity. It said, the children watching this are smart enough for this story. The parents watching with them are welcome. Nobody gets a simplified version. Everybody gets the truth. And the truth, as the show presents it across 3 years and 61 episodes, is this: the world breaks children. It breaks them with war and politics and cruelty and neglect and love that cannot protect and anger that cannot heal. The world breaks them, and some of them stay broken and some of them do not. And the difference is not strength or virtue or destiny. The difference is connection. The difference is whether, at the moment you are falling, there is a hand reaching for you. The show gives every character that hand or denies it to them, and the results are the story. Avatar, The Last Airbender premiered on on February the 21st, 2005 and ended on July 19th, 2008. 3 seasons, 61 episodes, created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. Head written by Aaron Ehas, animated by studios in Korea. Voiced by a cast of performers who gave everything they had to characters made of ink and light. It is not one of the best animated shows ever made. It is one of the most honest stories ever told about what it costs to grow up in a world that was broken before you were born. And the darkness does not diminish it. The darkness is the reason it endures. Because a story that flinches from its own pain is a story that does not trust you. And Avatar, The Last Airbender, from the first frame to the last, trusts you completely. It trusts you to see a boy discover his mentor's skeleton and understand what that means. It trusts you to watch a girl learn to control another person's body and feel the violation of it. It trusts you to sit with a man weeping over a picture of his dead son and not look away. It trusts you to hold a 14-year-old villain in your heart and call her what she is, a child who never had a chance. The show trusts you. That trust is its greatest gift. And it is the reason that nearly 20 years after it first aired, people are still watching, still thinking, still feeling the weight of what it built. The sunset is beautiful. The darkness underneath it is real. And both of them, held together, are the truth. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.